Worried about running out of money? Here's what to do.
Brent, I am so excited about this because a lot of people have this question. Their income comes in unique spurts and they want to figure out, how do I plan for this? How do I budget for this? And I love that we get to answer these kind of questions. As a matter of fact, I love that we get to answer all of your questions. It's why every Tuesday at 10 a.m. we do a live stream where we want to load you up and speak to things that you are curious about, because we believe that there's a better way to do money. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to you, Creative Director Reby.
Yes, Casey asks this very question. He says, I have started a new job where I get paid 90% of my salary within 5 months. How do I go about planning for this without running out of money before my pay kicks in again? What would you do in this unique situation?
Well, okay, so 90% pay inside of 5 months. That's unique, right? Like, not a lot of folks, not a lot of vocations allow that to happen, but there are a lot of folks out there that have like very sporadic and inconsistent income streams, and it does pose a very real problem for folks trying to figure, okay, well, how do I budget? Or these guys say that I'm supposed to be saving 25% of my gross income, but my gross income varies month to month or pay cycle to pay cycle. How do I do this well? How do I think about this well? And frankly, I think that people that are in this kind of situation, Brian, it's even a little bit, it's harder for them. It's harder than just the normal W-2 employee who gets the same paycheck every single pay cycle for an entire year. So as you've worked with folks in the past who've had like sporadic income streams like this, how have you told them how to tackle normalizing their cash flow?
Yeah, when I saw this question, I immediately wanted to go jump onto Google, type in KC NFL, because yes, in the past I've worked with NFL players, and it was quite unique in the fact that they got the majority of their money during the NFL season. Mm-hmm. And for one of the primary things we did for those clients is trying to set up a budget. Mm-hmm. And then once we set up the budget, then determining how we structure the portfolio so that, because all that money came in at once, but yet you've got 12 months of expenses, even though the income's coming in 5 months. So you batch the income coming in, you create the budget for the expenses, and then you just need to structure a cash management plan where at the first of each month or the 15th, the client determines or you determine when you need that money to hit. You have a transfer from your savings/investment accounts of cash direct deposited right into your banking account that you use to pay bills. Now, the key component of this, though, Bo, is discipline.
That's right.
Is because I'll tell you, if you think about it, if you get paid all your money in 5 months, now maybe this is a big bonus. I will say that if somebody has some long-term incentive options or some other thing like that. But if I was going off the scenario of somebody who's earning this based upon the work they do, the problem I had with my NFL players is off-season, they're somewhat bored. Mm-hmm. They train, and that's back to the discipline, is that whatever you set up in the budget, be realistic, stick to it, and then don't, make sure that you're not going too far off of the plan, because the thing I always worry about is 5 months out of 12 of the income, you have to make sure that you don't go outside of the lines too often, or this whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, I think I would be a proponent in terms of setting this up. Again, behavioral finance becomes so key here. I would think about how you could gamify and outsmart the system. I'm going to use some really round numbers here. Let's say that your annual income is $50,000, and I'm only doing this because I can do the math in my head and on the calculator that I have in front of me. Your annual income is $50,000, but it's going to come in $10,000 a month for 5 months. You cannot live as though your income is $10,000 a month. What you have to do, you have to take $50,000 a year, divide that by 12, and so it turns into about $4,100 a month. So if it's me, what I'm going to do is every time one of those paychecks hit, I'm going to put it in a separate account. I'm going to put it over here in a high yield savings account sitting there. And then every month from that savings account, I'm going to have $41 hit my checking account. And I'm going to budget off of that, and I'm going to live off of that, and I'm going to save off of that. And I'm going to pretend like my income is only $4,100 a month. And what it's going to allow me to do is not let my eyes get bigger than my wallet. And that $10,000 comes in, and I live like I make $10,000. And then I'm going to have 7 months out of the year where no income is coming in, and I'm in sort of like an position. So I think if you have to set some sort of system up like that to protect yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. And then just like anything else in personal finance or in life, the muscle memory will set in. Once you've done this for a year, 2, 3 years, then it'll just become a natural cadence in terms of how your cash flow works, even though it doesn't flow in like nice, even systematic chunks.
That's why I think automation is your friend. Structure as much of this to be, systematic and automatic, meaning you're paying the bills automatically, you're doing the savings and the transfers to different accounts automatically, and just make sure you're sticking to the budget. And then I like having the separate accounts, meaning have the paycheck go into the account that is not the account that you pay all the bills or do your living expenses out of. So that way you have separation. So you're doing exactly what Bo said. You're turning the 5 months of income into 12 months of transfers that feels like your monthly paycheck is actually X versus being that 5 lump sum, much bigger, twofold of what you normally get paid.
Yep.
Great answer. Casey, thank you for the question. Hope that helps you out. Next up, we've got a question from Then and Again. It says, I have a weird money psychology question. I was gifted a lot of shares in one company. I will receive more in an inheritance. I'm attached to these shares because my grandparents worked at the company, and I'm having a hard time selling. Someone talk me into it. I know diversification is the way.
So this is not an uncommon thing. A lot of times, folks, especially folks that are like second, third generation financial mutants, their grandparents or their parents will come up with the idea, hey, when Junior's born, we're going to go buy 100 shares of X, and that's going to be Junior's that one day they're going to end up with, or maybe we're going to pass that along. Well, then it does become this sentimental thing. Hey, I've had people like, oh, you know what? I know when I have a baby, I'm going to have to buy a lot of like Johnson & Johnson goods, the baby wipes and the butt paste and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm going to go buy shares of Johnson & Johnson so that way every time I'm going to the supermarket to make a purchase, I feel like I'm paying myself as a shareholder. And then one day I'll gift that to the kids, so on and so forth. And so it does become a bit of an emotional thing. Now, here's what I would say. There's nothing wrong with money being emotional. There's nothing wrong with holding on to an asset that has sentimental value to you, so long as it does not derail your other financial planning goals, your other financial priorities in life. And so if these gifted shares are a substantial portion of your net worth, let's say that your total net worth is $200,000 and these shares represent $100,000 of that, then yeah, I would argue that you have a concentration risk inherent in these shares. And so one of the things I would think through is if it's going to be really, really difficult to sell it all today and diversify because there's some sort of emotional tie, is there something we can do to remove the emotion from it? First of all, you said you're going to get an inheritance where more of this is going to come. So it probably matters less about holding on to those shares today because there's still more sitting in the background that's going to come your way. So I would think through, is there a very non-emotional, systematic way I could begin to exit this exposure? Just like a dollar cost average into the market or into a position, can I dollar cost divest out of that position over time? So that way it makes the sting hurt a little bit less. And then I'll determine what's an appropriate number for me. Maybe it's 5% of my net worth or 10% of my net worth. How do I then sell that position down in a tax efficient way so that I'm not risking my entire financial picture by holding on to this stock that maybe I know is not the absolute best thing for me?
So I'll basically play the part of summary because Bo just stole all the great meat off of that question bone. I wrote down success with or without stock, meaning how material is this? That was the part but where Bo was saying, does it impact your life? I wrote down spread it out. Just like Bo was talking about dollar cost averaging, you can also spread out. I mean, you don't have to do this all at once. It's not all or nothing. Why not make this change over a period of time? And then the last thing, I think this probably is a little new, is that when you get gifts from family, there are expectations even if they're not told to you. So I would encourage you, make sure you know what the family members who gave this to you. Now that doesn't mean you have to do everything that they tell you, but I would at least want to know what the family expectations are with this gift so that you can try to navigate that, keep the relationships happy, but also keep your financial life in a better place, because that's something. Look, we've had experiences where, if you're from Atlanta, there's a lot of Coca-Cola people out there. If you're from Columbus, Georgia, there's a lot of Aflac people out there. So I imagine a lot of you guys, no matter where you're from, there's some corporate story where great grandparents, got into the shares way early and now every generation passes it down. That's why those expectations probably need to be discussed, but then lay it against all those measurement tools that Bo laid out with, if this is going to ruin your life, if that stock does poorly, then you at least need to come up with some way to balance those expectations and you living your best financial life.
And then another thing that I would just think there is, you said that these shares were gifted to you. Well, if that's the case, then the basis in those shares carries over. So there's a big chance, or there's a good chance you have like large embedded gains in this holding if it's been something that's held for a long time. There's nothing that says you can't even be creative in terms of how you dispose of this. Let's say that you're someone who happens to be charitably minded and every month you want to give $500 to charity. Well, instead of giving $500 in cash every month to that charity, that organization you support, you could begin donating this appreciated security. Well, that way there's no tax bill. You're using it for good. You're carrying out the wishes of your loved ones, and it's allowing you to right the ship on your financial life. So it doesn't mean that you just have to sell it to be able to correct it. There are strategies that you can employ to slowly shift this through time in a super tax efficient and goal efficient manner.
And then that's probably a great segue into, I see so many people when they get sick, they immediately say, well, we got to start gifting the assets out to our loved ones. Let's change the title of the house. Let's, go ahead and start gifting these shares. You guys do realize in estate planning, look, the exemption is pretty big. Now, look, it is expected to go back in 2025. But right now, it's well over $13 million per person. So for a couple, it could be over $25 million. That's big. And you get what's called a step up in basis if you die with appreciated holdings. Whereas when you gift, it's exactly what Bo said. The basis goes with the gift, meaning you have to pay the income taxes as the recipient of it. So just pay attention to that. That's why I always get on to people when they start changing titles and making gifts without really understanding what they're creating in the taxes.
Good thoughts. Then and again, thank you for asking that question. We appreciate you being here.
Oh, another great thing that you could do? You could subscribe right now to the channel to make sure that as we put out all this new information, you're up to date when new content comes out. So if you are not subscribed and you're renting your seat right now, the purchase is super, super cheap. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button and you can hang out with us every single week.
Love
Ruby,
it.
I feel a little bit like Bo today, because I've got a Starbucks coffee in front of me, and I want to thank Caleb. This is actually spot on, nice cup of Joe right here. And it was, even though when I was sending the instructions, it was not very clear.
I did laugh because you were not being clear
and
at
then
all.
me trying to correct it while I'm dropping my daughter off at school was just in the spell check. Americano, I don't know if it's just if I'm spelling it wrong or if it's just not recognized by Apple phones. The iPhone, that's not even
It's
I wrote American like 3 or 4 times.
to American, so maybe it's not.
Yeah, so I kept saying American. I want a cup of American, and that's not what I wanted. So I appreciate it. But that's, if you're wondering why I look like Bo, sans the mustache.
I like how that's what looking like Bo
that's exactly
is.
right.
I don't know how you feel about that. But.
Caleb did not bring me coffee this morning. Did you know that? He brought you coffee. I got here super early. I had some stuff I had to knock out before we recorded. So I went and grabbed my own this morning. Caleb didn't bring me one.
That's probably because you didn't respond to the Slack
invitation.
chain.
To which I have now updated him. The answer is always yes. If you're ever bringing coffee and coming in, does Bo want coffee? Answer's always. If you're ever come to visit and you just want to know, what does Bo want today? He probably wants a cup of coffee. Yeah, I'm just throwing that out there.
That sounds like an entitled answer versus showing appreciation and actually responding to the Slack thread.
Hey, thanks for being you, Caleb.
All right. Well, on that note, all about your coffee habits, you ready to do some more questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Just making sure. Jonathan has one for you. He says, I'm 43 and the rule of 55 is interesting for flexibility. Should I roll my Vanguard IRAs into my 401k to have that option? You're going to have to say what the rule of 55 is.
Well, the answer is, Jonathan, because we're really good financial advisors, is it depends, right? Should I do this? It's very difficult to say, well, your unique situation, does this make sense? So let's talk for a moment about what the rule of 55 is. And Brian, then that you can talk about like the applicability, like how will Jonathan decide? Essentially, we know that with retirement assets, 401ks and IRAs and Roth IRAs, generally speaking, we can't access those assets penalty-free until age 59 and a half. They are built and designed to be retirement assets. So you have to make it all the way to 59.5 before you can start pulling those out. Except there is an exception. If you retire from the company who held your 401k in the year that you turn 55, you can begin withdrawing assets from your 401k plan without paying a penalty. You're still going to have to pay ordinary income tax if you're pulling out of the pre-tax portion, but the 10% penalty goes away. So we tell people often, hey, you're 54. Man, if you could just stick it out until next year, then you'll be able to access those dollars if you're going to need them for part of your retirement planning. So a lot of people don't realize that. And so they might decide, oh, okay, I'm retiring and I'm 56 years old. I'm going to roll my whole 401k into an IRA, not realizing what they've really done is they have now encumbered those assets where they can't get to them for a few more years. So Rule of 55 is a fantastic planning opportunity for those who are thinking about leaving the workforce before 60. So then the question is, one, Brian, does it work? Can I just roll IRA assets into a 401k and will I then be allowed to use those at 55? Then how do I know if this makes sense for me? Is this something that I should do?
Did Jonathan give us his age?
43.
This is, we got a ways.
I said it depends.
So that's why, I will tell you, Jonathan, and Bo kind of alluded to this, but it's just worth clarifying. Don't do this because if you're in your 40s, you do this, you work for this company for 7 years and then you leave at 50 years of age and then think you're going to come back and you'll have this basket of funds at 55 that you get access to. No. Remember, Bo's key part is it has to be the year that you turn 55 or you have to be over 55. So those are key elements. The second thing, look, Vanguard is one of the low-cost providers. We talk about Fidelity, we talk about Schwab, and we talk about Vanguard as being some of those low-cost providers that let you have great access to index funds and really create a lot of opportunities. A lot of 401ks, it's no coincidence, I think, by the same discussion that the largest 401k providers for employers is Fidelity's at the top of the list, but then Vanguard and Schwab are up there as well. So because they're good at being low-cost plans. But that does not mean that your 401k is the equivalent, because there's still a lot of 401ks. We see them from a decent amount of time where you don't know if it's the golf buddy or the college roommate or whoever it was that set up this plan, but it's expensive, it has poor investment choices, and it's just not very feature rich or as useful as maybe some of the things you can set up when you started funding your IRA or did your IRA rollover after you left your last job. So that's the part that rolls into the it depends. Is you can't skip doing the homework. Don't skip leg day. You've actually got to do the work of making sure you understand what you'd be rolling it into. Now it makes it much easier. Maybe the company you work for is a Fortune 500 company, and it is one of those equivalent plans at Fidelity, Schwab, or Vanguard. You still do the homework of looking into the plan to make sure it's as low cost as we're talking about, that there's not some expensive fees that are attached to it. And then I think you just have to build it into your financial plan. This is part of that complexity that we say finds you. You don't have to go looking for it. It's just as you're trying to figure out how you land the airplane and how you actually start using the resources, go from saver to a spender of what you've been building for these decades. This is definitely part of the plan. And I'd encourage you, if it gets too complicated, don't feel like you have to figure this all out, yourself and be the first one that creates and invents this path. Hire somebody who's done this hundreds, if not thousands of times.
So you're saying it depends on, is it the right decision? Meaning, is my current 401k as good as the IRAs? The other thing is the timing right? I'm 43. I don't necessarily have to do this. I could also carry out this strategy at 53 and it would still be just as viable. And then the third thing I would just add out is, would doing this now and today open up other planning opportunities? If you're someone who's maybe you can't do Roth contributions directly and you can't do backdoor Roth contributions, maybe rolling over the IRA today would open up the ability for you to do backdoor Roths. So it's just like you said, you got to do the homework. Don't skip leg day. Make sure you understand the implications of the decisions you're making, and make sure you're making the best decision for where you are right now in your financial journey.
Excellent. Jonathan, great question. Thanks for being here as always.
Yeah, I think that's going to be our new thing. That I've always been doing it, but I think it's just when we talk about doing stuff that you don't want to do, that's leg day. Because nobody who exercises likes doing exercises like, well, you're a weirdo.
I'm just saying, here's what's interesting. If you don't skip enough leg days, you know what you actually start to come to love?
What?
Start to come to love leg days. You know what I mean? Like you kind of get excited. Like if you do the hard stuff, you kind of like, oh man, the hard stuff. I kind of enjoy.
Look, I'll play the other side. Is that I saw a video that there was no better like exercise than like doing squats because it engages some of the biggest muscles of your body and it's but it is hard. I mean, especially you put it under heavy weight, it's hard. And I think that that's what people don't understand. It's not always about the cardio of running on a treadmill or doing that stuff. You can get just as much of a sweat about putting yourself under weight. And it does stink. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, if you hold a dumbbell and you're doing curls and stuff, that, it feels heavy, but legs hurt sometimes. So I know that you're one of those freaks, you and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno and all those guys. But for the average man,
in the same category as Mr.
For the average
Olympia
man just
Hulk.
trying to stay above ground, so we can enjoy life and maximize healthy living. Leg day is skipped by many people. That's why, I think I like that saying is that if you're going to request homework and homework that's hard, don't skip leg day.
Okay, great.
She says, okay.
Great. I just didn't know. I didn't know we were going to go there. We do have another question from Tucker, if you're ready for it.
Okay.
How should service members that have retirement at a much lower age than normal look at retirement and the amount needed at retirement?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so service members are really, really interesting. Your first question is, how should people that are retiring early think about their retirement? Well, I think one of the very first things you have to think about is longevity. Most folks, if you think about traditional retirement, they're going to retire at age 65 and they're going to live to somewhere between 85 to 95. So it's like 20 to 30 year retirement period. If you're a service member and you're going to be exiting in your 40s or 50s and you're considering that retirement, then what you're doing is instead of only having 20 to 30 years you have to plan for, you might be having 40 to 50 years you have to plan for. So you better make sure your planning is pretty jammed up. Now, what I have seen in my experience with a lot of service members is that when they leave the service, it's not really full retirement. It is stage one retirement, step to the next thing. It's like the next endeavor. And so one of the things I would figure out is, okay, based on my service, what have I done from an asset accumulation standpoint? Have I built up TSP assets? Have I built up investment assets? And then what sort of guaranteed sources of income will I have later in life? Am I going to have pensions? Am I going to have VA benefits? Like, what are the things that from my service career are going to carry through to later in life? And then from where I am today to where I ultimately want to be one day. So I know where I'm at today and I know the life I want to live when I'm living my most abundant life. Are there steps I need to take to get from where I am today to get there? And what most people find is, that's when I'm going to shift and I'm going to do some career 2.0. And maybe I do this for 10 years or maybe I do it for 15 years. But that's going to be a different stage of my career. But because of my service, because of the assets I've built, because of the low lifestyle I was able to have, because of the pension that I have, it's going to give me opportunities to be a lot more flexible. I don't have to go out and make $1 gazillion a year. I might just need to go out and make enough to cover my expenses and be able to save reasonably. And if I can do that for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, then I'm going to be set off to the races, ready to financially be independent.
I wrote down some quick notes here, Tucker. By the way, thank you for your service. I love that the Money Guy Show connects with a lot of people in the military. We even have studio tours come through, and it's kind of cool.
It's awesome.
It really makes it really exciting. So that's what. And one of the tours we did last week actually shaped my answer a little bit. So here's what I wrote down: expenses drive the process. If you have to write down once you leave service, what do you anticipate your budgeted burn rate is going to be? Because now you have the opportunity, once you know the expenses, you can lower, because that's the second thing, is what fills the gap from the difference between your anticipated pension from what that budgeted burn rate is. And then you have to figure out, how am I going to fill this gap? For a lot of people, it's exactly what Bo said. They might transition to another opportunity. That's a new job. I've got a cousin that did the same thing, but then that, he didn't realize he didn't love that as much. And then you have to kind of lean back on, do I have enough assets/investments to fill it so I don't have to work so hard with my back, my brain, and my hands, just like we always talk about with our army of dollar bills. But so those are the two, meat and potato parts of the answer. But here's a third one that I thought this was definitely something that service members ought to know. Make sure you get all the insurance you need before you retire. I'm talking about life insurance. I'm talking about disability insurance, because there's this weird dance with service members is that, and I even saw this with my cousin, is that you guys are doing unique jobs, and it's really hard on the body in a lot of ways. So a lot of times when you leave service, even though outward looking, you look very healthy, you might have some pretty gnarly damage to you somewhere else, whether it's your ankles or your knees from doing, or your ears, and all these unique things from just being in the military. So you're going to have some discussions with the VA to figure out if you qualify for additional benefits because of some of that damage you from your time of service. Get your, some of that might make you considered uninsurable. So that's why you have this weird dance where you have to get, I would encourage you before you have to kind of start, doing that part of it. Don't do insurance fraud. Don't mishear me, but I'm just saying make sure you have timed that out to understand maybe it's easier to get my disability in my life, before I have to have those unique conversations with, Veteran Affairs.
Ruby, I think there's another thing that we've been working on, but I don't know. Is it something can we talk about the thing that we've been working on? Or is that not a thing we can talk about? As it relates to service members and military families, and a special tool that they can use as they're trying to figure out the stuff that they have going on in life? I know we've been building it. I just don't know if we've released it yet.
Yeah, we actually do have a military ebook that we've kind of like pre-released to some of you through some ways. So we're excited that you kind of have your hands on it, and we are excited to release more of that in the future, because we know that our military Money Guy family is such a huge part of what we're doing. And so we're excited to just release even more good content and hopefully just helpful resources for you as time goes on, hopefully pretty soon. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
Great answer.
All right. R. Paris has a question for you next.
Our parents?
Our Paris.
Oh,
R. Paris.
The letter, I heard
the letter R.
Our parents.
Paris.
Like O-U-R. Parents.
Okay, you might be getting old.
That's it.
I'm out of here.
He's really roasting you today. But
Seriously.
he also put you in the same category as Arnold
I'm about to say, he
Schwarzenegger.
called me the Hulk, and
like
now
in
he's being
fitness.
Mr. Grumpy Gills over here.
So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. A little of everything. Okay, R. Paris has a question. He says, how should I treat the purchase of an RV? Does this count as a luxury vehicle and I need to pay cash, like the 23-8 rule says, or pay it off in a year? What do you think?
Well, let me tell you what it's not. RV is not like a 23/8 type purchase. That's
Just because it has wheels on it.
Yeah, this is not something to get you to your job. In my experience, generally when I think about recreational vehicles and something you're going to travel in, something you're going to sleep in, this, in my mind, falls more in the category of like a home purchase, like a second home. A lot of people treat an RV as their second home. So when you're thinking about, can I do this? One, I would think about it in that realm. Okay, am I at the stage of my financial career where buying a second home makes sense? If the answer to that question is no, meaning that I'm like early on in the FOO, I'm on 3, I'm on 4. Oh, Brian, do you have the thing? Can you hold the thing up? We have a 9-step tried and true process that'll walk you through what to do with your next dollar. RVs, not step 1, not step 2, not step 3, not step 4, not step 5, not step 6, not step 7, or you could just jump right to it. They are a step 8 thing. So the first question I would ask is, am I in step 8 of the financial order of operations? And if I am, then I can start thinking about buying an RV. But if I'm not, then maybe I am thinking about adding a second home prematurely. Agree, disagree, want to fight over this one? What do you think about RVs?
I look at RVs. Now look, a financial associate here in the office wrote a funny thing up on the board, and this question actually breaks their theorem. Now, they were trying to be funny. They said you can live in your car, but you can't drive your house to work. They were trying to be funny. It was not a very good joke, but I saw it on one of the whiteboards as I was walking by. And then this actually breaks it though, because you literally could drive this to your job as well. But I just know if you guys have ever rented an RV, these things I don't think they age well they depreciate as well. I mean, it definitely depreciates. And this is one of those lifestyle decisions y'all, I'm going to get some hate for saying this, but this definitely falls in the category of what I consider boats, RVs, off-road vehicles. These are all things that, are different than what's required for life. So that's why this is step 8 of the financial order of operations.
But you agree it's not an automobile. It's not like I'm thinking about upgrading to a luxury car.
It's not a
or an
23A.
RV. It's not a.
It's
a
totally
vehicle
separate
purchase.
type
Unless
of
this is the
expense,
plot
yeah.
of Christmas Vacation. This is not. This is not a
Unless you're literally
requirement.
living in it. Maybe.
So I think it's okay. Like if this does fit into your financial order of operations, we say all the time that money is nothing more than a tool to allow us to achieve our goals. And if one of our goals is to own an RV, I'm not going to be so stringent and say, hey, to buy an RV, you got to pay cash for it. I'm okay if you finance it. Same way that you might finance a second home if that was what you were doing. Assuming you're at the stage of your journey where that makes sense. Ooh, you want to fight now.
No,
I don't
didn't
want
like
to
you
that.
saw that.
It's just
He's
that-
starting to
That's a very
he's
reasonable
starting to get
answer.
ready.
It's just that
But
this is
Brian
an
hated
abundance
it.
goal. You just have to be careful because RVs can get really expensive.
Sure. So can beach houses.
So
Yeah.
it's just that they
So can lake
age,
houses.
they age a little differently. I've seen a lot of people make some decisions in step 8 for vacation property, and somehow, even though it was less than ideal, they've actually been rewarded for
Sure.
it. Whereas I don't know if I think the come out on the other side is as rewarding sometimes on an RV.
It sounds like you're anti-RV.
I was
I'm
going to
not
say, you're not an
anti-RV.
RV guy. I mean, I'm not an RV
do
person
you
either,
realize
but
there was a time in your life? I don't know if you remember
I
this.
tried. I
You-
tried
you
to
told
get
me.
my family to. I was like, "Look, let's drive from Tennessee
he would be an
to
RV
a national
guy.
park in an RV. We'll rent one,
And you were so excited
and
about
then
this.
we'll fly home because we'll probably be tired of the RV by the time we get to the national park. So we'll fly home." And my oldest daughter, at the time, she was in high school, I think at the time. She goes, "Dad, I'll blow through your data before we leave the state line." And I was like, "Okay, so I guess we're not doing this."
So you see what happened here? Brian was an RV guy. His child crushed his RV dreams, and
Got
now he's an
burned.
anti-RV guy.
It wasn't just my child.
Oh, his
My
whole
spouse.
family.
My spouse is like, "That's
His
not
whole
gonna be fun."
family. See, they robbed you.
that
of
makes
your
sense because I
RV
was like,
life.
this is interesting. Like, I get that.
Okay, maybe I got a blind spot.
A
here.
property is different than a vehicle. Like, I think that's fair to say, and depreciation, but like, especially for step 8 behavior, like Bo said, like if that's what you like to
That's
do,
what you
Brian,
wanna do.
that's what you've taught me.
Yeah, maybe.
If that's how you
and
want to
look,
deploy your
I'm
dollars
buying
and will bring
memories,
you some
not resale.
happiness.
I'm a girl dad, and I'm sure there's girls out there that love camping. But I know when we ever had those father-daughter or father-kids, sleepovers in the backyard with tents, my kids were always the ones that wanted to go home at night. So we just maybe
not
I'm not
an
an RV
RV
person.
family. That's
But it is
fine.
definitely an abundance goal.
It's a step 8. That's what it took us 6 minutes to say. It's not a car. It's a step 8 goal. I love it.
All right, well, our parents, hopefully that helps you
I'm
out, and
sad
thanks for
you.
helping
I
us
want you
get to
do
the
your RV
bottom.
trip.
So do you think your family would go on an
Brian's
RV trip?
issues.
No.
But
No.
you don't have a desire to go on
Hansons
an
would
RV,
not.
even though with that shirt would say otherwise.
I have zero desire to go on an RV trip. But you know what? If you invited me, you're like, hey, Bo, let's take the show on the road. Let's get an RV. Let's go for a week or two. I'd be down.
Interesting.
The only other
You see
RV
how quickly he didn't jump all over that?
He didn't like that
Well,
either.
I just
let
don't
that
see an
one
RV.
die on the
only
vine.
other RV story I have is that back when I was back when I was a wee below. When I thought I might go into Boy Scouts, they took us on a hike in the Appalachian Trail in North Georgia mountains.
Okay.
And I don't know who was in charge of this trip, but somehow we take a whole group of guys, young men, we were kids, and you had a few parents as chaperones, and it snowed. I mean, dumped snow upon snow upon snow up in the mountains, and we were staying from the Korean War tents, like surplus tents from the Korean War, and I had a sleeping bag that was not built for sub-zero. And I'll never forget, I woke up and my sleeping bag was soaking wet because there was a little tiny hole in the tent that soaked my sleeping bag. And meanwhile, 3 of my friends, one of the fathers brought an RV, and a group of the better halves got to sleep in the RV, but all of us that weren't in the cool kid camp at that time slept in the tents and about died.
There's some trauma. There's some
a lot of
trauma.
RV
There's some
related
trauma.
We
in RV
barely
trauma.
made it out of the mountains. I mean, I can visualize how hard it was coming out of those mountains in the cars trying to get home, because it just shows you how we talk about Generation X. It's almost like the parents back then just like, oh, screw it. Let's
It'll
do
be
it.
all right.
It'll be all right. It'll just work out. I mean, it's just because I look back on some of the decision making of my childhood and I'm like, who was the one saying, yeah, because you know that snow was forecasted and they're like, it'll be all right. We'll be okay.
I'm just imagining.
Probably the person in the RV said that it'll be all right.
Probably.
7-year-old Brian with tattered clothes
So
walking
sad.
out of the woods, hair disheveled, full beard from the 3 days.
By the way, all my
Just
friends,
like coming out of war.
all my friends that were in the RV, now thinking about this, they all got Eagle Scouts. I think this is the
You're like,
dividing
of
line.
course they
You
thought it
look
was
at life
easy.
and you go fork in the road moments. Me in the leaky tent probably is what kept me from becoming an Eagle Scout. And then all my buddies who were sleeping in the comfort of the RV actually became Eagle
Continued on in the
Scouts.
journey.
So I think that was the dividing line.
That was a good piece of history.
I'm glad that came out right there.
Me too.
The ones that were in the RV know who they are. So maybe there is a bias.
I think
We just had therapy.
there definitely
Who
is
send that?
something
Who
there.
sending me the
Go ahead
bill?
and send me that bill.
Oh, man. All right. We've got a couple more questions. Are you ready for them?
Yes, ma'am.
Sinking Potato says, I'm 26 and on step 7.
Nice.
Should I diversify my granted RSUs? How should I approach this?
So, Sinking Potato sounds like you work for a company that part of your compensation isn't just the W-2 wage that you receive, but you receive some stock compensation in the forms of restricted stock units. For those of you that don't know, this means that, hey, as an employer, I'm going to give you shares in this company, but you're not going to get them all today. I'm going to give you X number of shares, and they're going to vest over a certain period of time. Often, maybe you'll get a third next year, a third the year after, and then the final third in the following year. And so that's great. You get vested in this, and when these shares vest, they're immediately taxable to you. And then they're your shares. You get to choose what you do with it. Well, a lot of folks, this is kind of out of sight, out of mind. Like I get my paycheck, it's my checking account, I've got these things happening in the background, and before you know it, after you've worked through a number of vesting cycles, you're sitting there saying, holy cow, I have a ton of RSUs. I have a ton of exposure. And while that may be exciting, certainly if you're working for a company whose stock price has done well, what you may not realize is that you've actually inserted a ton of risk into your overall financial picture, because now, not only is all of your human capital tied up in this singular company, right? They are your JOB. They're where... What did I still? I'm
going to just start stealing. We're going to play the word game here. Whenever you steal my answers, I'm just going to check them off and say, okay, there it is. Keep going.
All of your human capital is tied up in this company. Well, now the majority of your financial capital can also be tied up in it. So what you want to make sure you do is you don't become over-concentrated to that singular company. So you ought to think about a strategy on how you divest RSUs. Brian, when we think about people divesting RSUs, what are some of the ways that we often see people do this? And what are, as a tax guy, what are the good tax ways to think about this?
Well, there's several things to consider here. Is that you're getting RSUs every year. So it's almost like a ladder in the fact that, you got some coming in, you got some coming out. You got some coming in, you got some coming out. So it really creates a cool system to where you can create diversification just through the passage of time and creating a system that lets you sell these. Now, you can figure out how optimistic you are about the company you're with keeping in that delicate balance that Bo was talking about of human capital versus investment capital. But I mean, a lot of people just turn them over. I mean, that's the typical thing. With options, sometimes you exercise them and then you hold them for 12 months and then you wash and repeat on the diversification. RSUs are a little different.
Because when they vest, it's taxable to you on that day. So if you sell them immediately, there's no additional tax consequence. It's the point of minimal tax impact if you sell when the RSUs vest.
So I definitely agree with Bo. Make sure you're diversifying your human capital from the investment capital. The other thing I was going to say is it's not uncommon when I see this type of stuff for these companies, these public companies, they also offer employee stock purchase plans where they will offer like 15% discounts and they do the lower of at the beginning of the quarter or at the end of the quarter. We look at this as like step 2 on the financial order of operations because it literally is free money. But you have to walk this delicate balance of maximizing these employer benefits, but getting out of them or diversifying them as fast as you possibly can, because there is obviously risk of concentration. But man, oh man, what an awesome wealth building opportunity if you understand the risk, you understand the opportunity, and you execute a plan that lets you leverage and build on this to maximize your wealth building journey.
That's great.
Awesome. Thinking Potato, thanks for the question. Scott's question is up next. He says, I have about $60K in my thrift savings plan. New retirement tells me the most efficient thing to do tax-wise in converting to Roth is to convert to Roth as soon as possible. Any recommendations?
Well, I think that's taking into account the time component of it, but where's the tax component, Bo?
Yeah, what I would argue is anytime you read something that tells you this thing is absolutely the number one thing that you should do and is best for you, my spidey senses would immediately go off because personal finance is personal. And so what's best for you may not be what's best for the person that sits next to you at the office. So we love Roth conversions. It's an idea of I take pre-tax assets and I convert them into Roth and I pay tax now and then those dollars grow tax-free. But with the TSP, I think isn't there like a Roth ability to do contributions to your TSP and Roth? So maybe instead of you converting, maybe switching how your contributions go in might make sense. It is unclear based on your unique circumstances what would be the best answer. Because ultimately, Brian, when you think about Roth conversion decisions, you have to make some tax assumptions, right? Based on like where you are today versus what you think in the future to drive which one might make the most sense, right?
The quick things I wrote down was tax rates and when matters, because I want you to write down your life timeline or anticipated life timeline, is because what we always are looking for are there arbitrage opportunities to get the lowest tax rates for the income that you got coming in. Obviously, if you're in your peak earning years, you're paying the highest marginal rates for ordinary income tax opportunities like a Roth conversion. Yep. But if you look ahead and you say, hey, there's going to be a season, maybe I'm taking a sabbatical or maybe I'm changing careers or I'm retiring early and I'm going to have a year or two where I'm living off of after-tax assets and my taxable income for my return purposes is going to be very low, by all means, use those years to convert assets that are in those traditional type of tax-deferred assets into Roth assets, but you got to do the work. You've got to do the timeline, you got to do the tax projections, and you got to measure twice, cut once.
I love it.
Fantastic. As always, these were great questions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for asking. Thank you for showing up during our premieres and live streams every week. We just want to hopefully be helpful and help you feel more confident about your wealth building journey. So keep tuning in here on YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't already, and be sure to check out moneyguy.com/resources for our abundance of free calculators and downloads just to help you continue these conversations about personal finance. So as always, thanks for being here.
You know, as we get to these time of the year, I always get somewhat more sentimental, if you can believe that's even possible. And that's why it's always worth repeating that true wealth is the ability to focus on what really matters to you and your family. I'm your host, Brian Preston. Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.